now say they plan to redraw their maps in an attempt to give Democrats a better chance to compete for the congressional majority in the midterms. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is among the first vowing to take action. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the details.
All's fair in love and war. That's why I'm exploring with our leaders every option to redraw our state congressional lines as soon as possible.
We're going to fight fire with fire, and we're going to do everything we can right now to stand up against this unconstitutional power grab by the Republicans.
California could take steps to also redraw their lines. Those state laws could make it more difficult for that state to do so. Illinois' governor also said that all options are on the table, though only 3 Republicans currently represent Illinois here in the halls of Congress. Now, what's at stake for Democrats with this new Texas map is a tighter race to win the majority come midterms. So this new Texas map would give Republicans a better competitive edge in districts that are currently Democrat strongholds in Texas. That's what led those Democratic lawmakers to flee the state in an attempt to block or at least stall a vote to confirm this new map. Now they're facing arrest warrants and possible felony charges.
Our fellow Texans are being let down and not getting the flood relief they need because these Democrats have absconded from the responsibility, and I believe they have forfeited their seats in the state legislature because they're not doing the job they were elected to do.
There is no basis to charge these House Texas Democrats who have refused righteously to, at the moment, vote on an extraordinary map that would hurt their constituents.
The governor also says that some of those state lawmakers may have violated bribery laws for soliciting or accepting funds in order to pay for some of those fines that they're now facing for fleeing the state. The governor has directed the Texas Rangers to investigate. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Though the Democrats' absence delays the Texas House from approving the new congressional map, it is all but sure to pass once Democrats return. The Texas Democrats plan to stay out of state for at least 2 weeks. This morning, they spoke from Chicago. Here's a look.
Texas House Democrats are demonstrating what it means to fight for the preservation of our constitutional republic. Donald Trump, Governor Abbott, Texas Republicans, well, they know that they're headed toward a loss of the Congress in 2026. They're afraid.
Folks saying that we walked out. And I think everyone behind me will say, we're standing up. And as Texans would say, we're standing tall. There's others that are saying and warning us that they're going to arrest us or make us pay fines. I'll pay that price for America.
You already have the governor's office. You, the majority in the Senate, the majority in the House. What more do you want? What more do you want? You have the power.
Their comments come ahead of the 60-year anniversary of the Voting Rights Act being signed into law. The lawmakers argue minority voters are disenfranchised and that this new congressional map exacerbates the issue. Republicans have said the reason they're redrawing the map, the lines, is to comply with the Constitution. The DOJ in July warned the governor that 4 districts were unconstitutional coalition districts. Civil arrest warrants have been issued for Texas Democratic lawmakers who left the state in the middle of a congressional district fight. Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for Daily Signal and host of Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast, joins us now to discuss. Tony, good to see you. So it's just me and you today. Mike is actually here, but he won't be joining this conversation. He'll be here in studio to talk to us about another topic. So yeah, how are you doing today?
I mean, I'm doing pretty well. It's sad to hear that Mike, Leon, that you guys get them all to yourselves later. I really look forward to the segment we get to talk about some of this policy fairly. So always good to be with you, though, Don.
Yeah, we'll see if we can have you come in studio and Mike too at the same time, and then we'll have a real conversation about a topic. So, but for today, the Texas House of Representatives voted to arrest lawmakers who weren't present yesterday. What does this mean for those lawmakers, and what are the impacts?
Well, first of all, this is not new. So gerrymandering is something that's over 200 years old in this country. State legislatures, this was originally one of the measures that the state legislature was given to check the House of Representatives. They are allowed to, in their state or Commonwealth constitutions, design the congressional maps for their district. Now, the Supreme Court does, in fact, have the ability to overrule those particular maps if, for example, like in Texas, some of those districts are drawn up via racial lines. Which is not allowed. That is a civil rights violation. You can't say, well, the black people live here, so they get their own district, or we're going to try to cordon off their votes. That's one of the things that Texas is, according to the representation in the legislature, trying to resolve. And again, you can make arguments as to whether or not that's political gerrymandering. It's a very old institution. So is the arrest warrants for legislators who, instead of just voting no on bills, running out of the state to break quorum. And not just from Republicans issuing warrants for Democrats. We saw this in Oregon in 2019 in reverse. We saw Republican lawmakers in Oregon state legislature flee to Idaho so that they didn't have to go into quorum on a state legislation for ending carbon emissions by 2050. And it didn't work. The Oregon State Police issued arrest warrants. And then when the legislators were brought back, they were asked to pay a small fine. And that's what's really being seen here. Now, the Texas Democrats did, many of them, accept a $35,000 private jet ride to Chicago, which is where Governor Abbott's Class 2 felony bribery charges are being investigated.
So, Tony, both sides of the issue are saying they have the moral high ground. I'm wondering, maybe both sides have a point to a certain degree.
I don't think that moral high ground and politics typically go hand in hand. It's just politics. I don't think it's nefarious, but state legislatures in power redistrict maps in order to benefit their party. It is a tale as old as time for every single state. And though Texas is on the screen right now and the map would be theoretically turning more Republican or more competitive for Republicans, the irony of Texas Democrats fleeing to Illinois, the most gerrymandered state in the country, who 2/3 of the state is split between 3 House districts. The southern 2/3 of the state is essentially a Croatia shaped letter C of a district around the stripe that goes up from the border of St. Louis up through Springfield to make a Democrat district. And then 1 congressional seat is allotted to 1/3 of the state. Gerrymandering happens everywhere, so no side really has a moral high ground. And I do think it's interesting watching California, Illinois, and New York, who are already a little too gerrymandered, as the New York Times pointed out, to make it any worse, before the Supreme Court would step in and say, you actually can't make your state electoral map look like spaghetti to levy all of the districts in one fashion.
So how do you think this is going to play out? As we've seen earlier, some Democrats, it seems like, would rather be arrested than return.
I mean, some of them will end up having to return anyway, because it looks like the Texas Supreme Court might rule in Governor Abbott's favor that, yeah, I mean, if you don't show up for your job, then you are abdicating your role as legislator. If I served in the Indiana House, for example, and I left to spend a couple of weeks in Texas mid-session, then the Indiana governor does have the authority to essentially remove me from my seat, barring some kind of a medical condition or something like that that may have been made. The Indiana Speaker of the House, for example, could make an excuse for me. But according to the Indiana Constitution, I could be removed if I don't show up for work. And in Texas, the Constitution is a little bit more ambiguous on this front, which is why Abbott's going to the Supreme Court, which is why I think that these representatives eventually will return. They'll be like the Soviets.
And apparently it's a tech issue, but glad you stayed on. So I don't know where you were talking or where you left off earlier. Perhaps you can just finish the last portion of that sentence or that response earlier.
To put a fine point on your question as to what the long-term consequences are, what's going to happen next, I predict they'll come back, because if not, Governor Abbott will ask the Texas Supreme Court for authority to replace them. So they'll act as the Soviets, triumphantly retreating from Afghanistan, and we'll see this. Again, this group of Texas Democrats has actually done this before. Like the same crew, like Gene Wu has fled the state before. So I think that they'll just come back with their tails between their legs like they have previously.
How do you think the American people views this drama, if you will? Does it put more trust, or maybe that's not the right question, but how or less trust, how do Americans view this?
Well, I think that you used the right word, drama. I mean, I remember as a middle school science teacher, I'd have students bickering about the most silly of things, and this is one of them. The Texan state legislature does in fact have the majority for Republicans. You know, you can see Democrat Representative Jasmine Crockett trying to claim on the national stage that Abbott is a terrible, mean, corrupt man who's ignoring the quote unquote majority minority state. But according to all of the polls in Texas, Republicans do have the support of the majority of not just, as maybe Jasmine Crockett would say, white Texans, but also Hispanic Texans as well. So if we're looking at the current situation in that state, it's ridiculous to suggest that people's rights are being violated. Americans likely just see this as political theater. And as for the hyping up about gerrymandering, again, it just takes looking at a couple of other states in the country to know that this is a tale as old as time.
Okay, and the Democrats are saying that they're doing this for their constituents. But if Americans view this as a drama, maybe perhaps they don't really think that their motive is what they actually say.
I mean, come on, Don. When's the last time that you heard your congressman say, I'm doing this for my constituents? And you got a warm place right behind that nice blue tie and thought, wow, he's talking about me. I don't care whether it's a Republican, Democrat, independent. Come on, politicians in Congress, there's a reason they are the least favored organization in the United States. And it's because everything in politics is performative theater. Too many times these days, people want my job, so they get elected to be on camera. Some of us actually have to do the media broadcasting and journalistic work to get people to watch what we do, not win an election in some forlorn district.
Well, maybe perhaps it's obvious to us, but I would imagine there's many Americans who are not so well versed in politics who, I don't know, perhaps believe that, right?
I have a lot of confidence in the American people over the last 10 years who really do believe that a lot of this is simply theater. I mean, don't get me wrong, congressmen and what they believe, very important. It is obviously a necessary thing. Benjamin Franklin said it's a republic if you can keep it. That necessitates people being involved in the process of electing state and federal legislators. But as to hanging on the words of everything being a live or die situation, which is something we've been talking about quite a bit recently on the show, I don't think we're in that era anymore where everything is gloom and doom, life or death. I think that Americans are coming out of that, and the kind of post-Vietnam age that became the post-Iraq and Afghanistan age in America has passed. And what we're seeing is a general optimism again, which means that if it bleeds, it leads kind of journalism, it's the end of the world style stuff, just doesn't terrify the public like it used to. And I think that's a very good thing.
Okay, Tony, there's another issue that I want to talk to you about, and that is the Department of Homeland Security is no longer explicitly denying relief for boycotts.